Hello friends. I used the owl gliding silently through the night. I think that this is important time to use the owl's skills of quietness, consideration, and observation. But let's talk about the charts for the Schumann resonance. This is the energy from your feet up to the top of the sky. It's an electromagnetic energy from 0 to 40 hertz, which coincidentally is the same range for the human brainwaves. And when I interpret the chart, I do take a spirit plus science approach. So we're going to look at the numbers behind the images, and I'm also going to do an intuitive interpretation of the images as if it's a canvas of representing human consciousness. So it's intraday on Monday on the chart today, and there's a really interesting thing going on here. The technological effect has been continuing in the lower hertz for some time, and it's interesting because it's made a change, because although it normally, other times has gone the full length of the chart very visibly, and it's not to say that it couldn't be back here somehow, hidden in here, because it does look like there could be very light repeating lines in the background, but it's very, very, very clear up here in the lower hertz. And yeah, it's really interesting. On the last video, that was a really good video with a lot of information about the current themes. If you haven't seen it, you should go back and look at it, and I will link it here. Also, actually, I forgot to mention, if you could like the video and subscribe, if you could share it, if it resonates with you, that would be so fantastic. This really, really helps me with getting my work out there, and it helps me with the algorithms when you guys do that. So thank you. So here's the tower, okay, that was on the last video that I made. And I talked about how this was a rewounding of a very famous event from 20 years ago. Next to the tower, interestingly, there was a fire, like a fireball. We talked about the lens wave several times over the last 3 or 4 months. To me, it very much looks like, see the rounded lens wave in the background, and then it has like a handle, almost like a magnifying glass. There is like there's 2 images. There's this line that comes forward like a sword in front of the lens. How I viewed this was that it was presenting as energy in flux. It also looks like a burning fire or a burning ball of energy, but it very much looks like things are in flux. And because we have a rewounding here with this image, and I went all through that in the last video, we're coming back around again some period of time later. For this specific event, it's 20 years. But what I'm finding in just generally chatting with people and making observations is that I think that we are facing, certain things coming up in our lives. Let me go over that in a little bit more. Here, this is this light bar is a similar shape that we've also seen before. I call it like the knife shape of the light bar, and you can see that it goes from not quite 0, but very, very low hertz to about 28. What this is doing is it's bringing the light of awareness, right, from our unconscious, subconscious, waking state, and then into our more complex thinking, all the way into the high beta brain waves. But the knife image, how I interpret that, is that we are being invited to edit out what does not serve our highest good at all of these levels of our human brainwaves or human thinking. And when it comes to the unconscious and subconscious, this takes some doing to see our shadow and to apply our awareness to the places where we are not conscious. So the question is, what are we invited to remove from our thinking? What are we invited to let go of from our emotional state? What are we invited to move on from spiritually or move into a new level? What are we invited to work on physically? So at all levels of our human incarnation, being a human being. For different people, this is going to be in different areas of their life. But you can also, it also can combine, and I'm finding that in my life. I'm using my thinking to let go of certain emotions. I'm using my thinking to figure out how to address my physical body. You know, slow and steady wins the race, putting into place long-term fixes. And so it's okay to take the time to think through them. But let's look behind the chart at the frequencies. So what I did was, where there are light bars, I boxed it. And you can see that there were dips where the towers were, and there were dips here at the knife energy. I don't know, for some reason it just seems like when there's a dip, it seems like the wave has more of a divine or expanded aspect to the energy. It's interesting, really, because the amplitudes were very low. They were very low for this whole tower and then the lens, flaming lens wave. You see here? Because they're 26 in white, 20 in yellow, 12-ish in red, and about 9 in green. So this is more of a gentle energy, because if you had kind of that knife energy and it was very high amplitudes, I think it would be much more dramatic. But it does give us the energy to see what's going on, to see where the rewounding is, and make a new choice. Qualities continue to be low across the board, and they were on the July 4th chart as well. As I've said on other videos, but I want to repeat it if you haven't heard it, I feel that the lower qualities gives us access to a broader range of our human experience, because we're more, I'm searching for the word in my vocabulary, but it's like, I did a really good video explaining the qualities a while back. It's like if you have a drop of water and it drops into a lake, right? And then you have the ripples going out like rings around that drop. Well, the single drop would be like a high quality, because a single drop represents the pure connection with our soul, okay? Or with the energy that's the true essence of who we are. The ripples going out would kind of be our living life in the living world, and all of our experiences, whether they relate specifically to that drop or not. And so it's kind of the opposite of what you would think, right? But with all those rings going out and out and out and out, we have more access to what we have been engaged in, okay, in life. And we can go back and say, oh, I have this skill set. Do I want to go back and use that now? Oh, I have this attitude. I forgot about that. Do I want to try that and see how it works for me to take that on or not? Anyway, so that's how I see the human expression of this actually across the frequency ranges, even though the green, in my view, represents just the pure sort of human experience. And it's very low, which also puts it out of the scope of certain forces. Certain forces, the forces of darkness, can't see us as well, is my view, when our quality is low like this. And what that means is that we might end up surprising them in some way that they can't anticipate because of that. All right, so we just did all of these. Yeah, so anyway, it's interesting to see how these are separating here, isn't it? And there was a lot of dissonance on the chart there. That was right sort of around here. And this is similar to an energy that I talked about on the video with the four horses. I think that was 2 videos ago. It's a similar energy where before they were charging forth, okay? And now I see people in the charge forth, and maybe even a rider on top of one of the horses. So that's interesting. You know what this looks like to me? It looks like one of those candles with like a wire around it, or ivy around it, and then a flame at the top. And there's a cross up there. It's actually at an angle. The cross is at an angle. Actually, I'm going to make an arrow and show you the flow of the chart here. Okay, so it's like you go dip down, up, and then you get like a little hiccup here, okay? Then you dip down, and then you kind of skate across, dip down, skate across, not too high. These aren't very high waves. Down, it's a very low dip here. And then you get, and then sort of, I don't know if this is a drop or what, and then drop again, like almost like a trench here, like a trench. And then, so this is pretty choppy in here, okay? This is pretty choppy to move across. And then here you get almost like a steepness, and then down. And then we get a little bit more gentle up, but then we've got the knife effect. We've got smoothness here, and then we go up, down, and then we're kind of skating across here. And it feels very, very choppy and slippery, and then down, and then up again. So there's some calmness interspersed with a lot of choppiness, and then sudden kind of drops in energy. That's how it reads to me. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about in interpreting this is, shoot, my fan went on, but the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, we talked about how these hurts are reflective of human brainwaves. Well, how you are experiencing the energies, I want you to think about this, or I suggest you think about it, is that where your consciousness level is, right, in terms of where your thinking is. If you are operating from the shadow here, it's a lot choppier than if you've done some work and then you're here in the high betas. Does that make sense? But if you're in the spiritual brainwaves up here in the higher hertz, okay, it's actually very transformative, because look at that fiery, I always think of this type of presentation as a very fiery energy, like flames here. So this is a very spiritually, potentially transformative time. So here's what I wanted to say to you, is that I feel that this is a time of testing. To come through the time of testing, it pays to silently observe unto oneself. That doesn't mean that we can't bounce things off people who we're close with, but this is a time where the personal decisions you make are going to be very impactful. And there's people going through even, kind of live or die type of situations. I had an experience with someone recently where there was, how I perceived it, okay, is there was an offer to be ill and pass on, which they declined and did a bunch of spiritual work and personal commitment and other things that I don't want to go into that were medical plus spiritual. And the person was getting better, and then suddenly they were thrown into another, I would call it live or die situation, that presented much differently in the physical world. And it's like that idea of rewounding coming up. The choice came up again. Do you really mean it? Right? Do you really mean it? Do you really want to make it through this period and live and then expand your life? And the person ended up being completely fine, probably because they were so good at calling in their spiritual protection, among other things. So that ability, and that's an extreme example. I'll give you another example of another person that I chatted with recently. That person has a physical manifestation coming up in the body of something that happened 2 years ago, but this time it's much less harsh, okay? It's much easier to deal with. But at the time this first came up, and it took months to heal this particular physical ailment, the person then decided to make a complete physical and like spirit-based, is their attitude about themselves. They decided to completely change it and improve their attitude about themselves. And they started to slack off recently, and then the exact same physical ailment presented, but it's like a tenth of what it was. And I think in this case, the person is still committed to what they were doing, but it's kind of like, again, there's an offer. Are you sure you want to do this? And that's why I say that it's a time of testing. And again, this person as well, I'm sure they are going to recommit to both healing the ailment and committing to themselves and what they intend for themselves in their life. So this is what I mean by time of testing. It's kind of a between you and the divine type of time where the decisions that you make for yourself are critical, but we are truly supported in this time. We're truly supported because when we call on the light that we are, when we call on our connection with our soul, when we call on our connection with the Creator, our spiritual guidance team of the highest light, our angels of the highest light, however you want to say that, but I think it's all of that. We immediately have that support. The gates are open for us to walk through, but there is testing in the process.